All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a concept that is so fundamental, it could totally reshape how you look at everything: success, failure, even the act of changing your life. We're getting into the core ideas from Robert Fritz's classic book, The Path of Least Resistance. And just to be clear, this isn't about little life hacks or productivity tips. Nope. This is about understanding the deep, invisible currents that are, constantly guiding our lives. Think about it for a second. We all work hard. We all have goals. We're all trying to steer the ship in a certain direction. But have you ever had that feeling like you're just fighting a powerful unseen tide? Like you're swimming upstream and getting nowhere? Well, that's exactly what we're going to investigate. We're going to dig into the hidden structures that shape our reality, and we're going to figure out why so many of our best, most sincere efforts to change just fizzle out and end in frustration. But more importantly, we're going to learn how to stop fighting that tide, and instead learn how to reshape the riverbed itself, to literally shift the underlying structure so that creating what you want becomes the easiest path to take, not through more struggle, but with way more ease.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The whole reason we're doing this explainer today really comes down to a very specific, and I mean very common human experience. So I want you to really honestly think about this question. Have you ever felt like you are on a hamster wheel? You know the feeling. You decide there's something you want to change. Let's use a classic example, health. You decide, okay, that's it, I'm going to lose 15 pounds. And you start out with all this motivation, right? You get the new workout gear, you clean out the fridge, you're meal prepping like a champion every Sunday. And for a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, you're just crushing it. The numbers on the scale are going down, you've got more energy, your clothes feel better. You are absolutely winning. And then something happens. A crazy week at work means you skip a few gym sessions, there's a birthday party, and, well, there's cake. And slowly, almost so you don't even notice, the old habits just creep back in. And 6 months later, you look up and you're right back where you started, maybe even a few pounds heavier, staring at those workout clothes feeling completely defeated. And look, this isn't just about weight loss. It's the same thing for the entrepreneur who works like crazy to grow their business, only to see it shrink right back to where it was last year. Or the writer who has this burst of inspiration, knocks out 50 pages of a novel, and then that manuscript just sits there gathering dust for a year. It's this incredibly frustrating cycle, right? 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. You're pouring in your most precious resources, your time, your energy, your willpower, and yet real lasting change feels like it's always just out of reach. If any of that sounds familiar in any part of your life, I want you to know you're not alone, and it's not because you lack character or willpower. What you're experiencing is a fundamental law of structure, and we are about to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works.
So this feeling of being stuck, this whole cycle of moving forward and then sliding back that we just talked about, it's more than just a feeling. It's actually a predictable, observable phenomenon. Seriously, it's not some personal failing or a unique curse that only you have. It's a structural dynamic. And just giving this thing a name is the very first step toward really understanding it and eventually being able to change it. The best way to think about it is like a lifelong tug of war. A constant pulling tension between what you want and where you actually are.
Yeah, this really captures the whole dynamic perfectly. On one side of the rope, you've got your goal, this clear, vivid desire. It's the finished novel, the booming business, the healthy, energetic body you're picturing. But then on the other side, you've got your current reality. And that reality seems to have its own kind of gravity, a force that just relentlessly pulls you back. This is the common trap that we all fall into. It really is a tug of war. You're on one end, you're pulling with all of your might. You're using your motivation, your discipline, your positive thinking, everything you've got. And for a little while it works. You make some progress, you pull that little center flag over to your side of the line. But here's the thing you don't realize. On the other end of that rope, there's an invisible anchor pulling back against you. And that anchor is the underlying structure of your life. It's your deep-seated beliefs, your ingrained habits, the environment you're in. And because that anchor is so powerful, the second your grip loosens, the moment your willpower dips even a tiny bit, swoop, the rope just slides right back and you lose all the ground you just fought so hard to gain. This can go on for years, and it just leaves you feeling completely exhausted and, frankly, like you can't win.
The author, Robert Fritz, he gives this whole thing a really precise name: an oscillating structure. Now, to really get this, let's use his fantastic analogy of a pendulum. Just picture a big, heavy pendulum on a grandfather clock. Its entire design, its fundamental structure, means it has to swing back and forth. That's its job. Oscillation is what it's built for. Now, you could go over to that clock, grab the pendulum, and pull it all the way over to the right.
You could hold it there with all your strength. But what's the path of least resistance for that pendulum the moment you let go? It's going to swing, right? It's going to swing all the way back to the left, probably overshoot the middle, and then eventually settle back into its rhythm. Back and forth, back and forth. Fritz's big insight is that so many of us have, without even realizing it, built our lives on this exact kind of structure. Our attempts to change are like us grabbing that pendulum and holding it to one side. We keep it there with sheer force of will. But the structure itself, our beliefs about ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves, all the conflicting desires we might have, that structure is built to oscillate. So the system just naturally wants to go back to its equilibrium, and poof, our progress is gone. We aren't failing because we lack willpower. We're part of a system that is doing its job perfectly. It's like we're trying to force a pendulum to be a signpost, and it's just not designed for that. Okay, so when we find ourselves stuck in this super frustrating back and forth, what's our first instinct? What do we always do? We try harder. We push more. We double down on discipline and willpower. We tell ourselves, if I just had more grit, if I was just tougher, I could hold this pendulum in place. But here's the really fascinating and totally counterintuitive part. That very approach, just applying more force, is often the one thing that's guaranteed to make the problem worse. It doesn't break the cycle. It just makes the swings more dramatic and way more exhausting. Let's dig into why our most trusted tool, willpower, is actually part of the trap itself.
This quote from Fritz says it all. Let's really get a picture of his analogy here, fighting the ocean tide. Imagine you go down to the beach, and you are determined to stop the tide from coming in. You brace yourself, you plant your feet in the sand, and you start pushing against the waves with everything you've got. You are expending a massive amount of energy. You might even feel kind of heroic, battling the immense power of the ocean. But what are you actually achieving? Nothing. You're not changing the tide. The tide is controlled by a colossal structural reality. The moon's gravity, the sun's gravity, the Earth's rotation. Your personal effort, no matter how incredible it is just a tiny drop in the bucket by comparison. The exact same thing is true for the deep structures in our lives. Applying more willpower to an oscillating structure is just like pushing harder against the tide. You don't stop the back and forth, you just get knocked over with more force when it swings back. Fritz has a name for this: compensating feedback. The harder you push on one part of the system, the harder the system pushes back from somewhere else to keep its balance. Think of a thermostat. If the room is cold and you open a window to try and cool it down even more, what happens? The thermostat, the structure, senses the temperature drop and tells the furnace to blast even hotter. It's working against you to get back to its set point. And this is exactly why just trying harder so often leads to burnout, not a breakthrough. Okay, now here's the other big trap. And this one is subtle, but it is so profound. It's our society's obsession with problem solving. It's really important to get the distinction Fritz is making here. See, problem solving is all about getting rid of something you don't want. Its energy source is negative. You have a headache, so you take a pill to make the pain go away. The second the pain is gone, your motivation to do anything about it vanishes. Creating, on the other hand, is totally different. It's motivated by bringing something you do want into the world. A composer doesn't write a symphony to, solve the problem of silence. An architect isn't trying to solve the problem of an empty piece of land when they design a beautiful building. No, they're driven by a positive vision they want to make real. So think about this in terms of that oscillating structure. If your main motivation for change is a problem, like I hate being in debt, then the energy for your actions comes from the pain of that problem. As you start to take action, like paying down a credit card, the problem gets a little smaller. The pain starts to ease up. And then what happens to your motivation? It starts to fade. You're not as worried about it anymore. And pretty soon the problem creeps back in, the pain level rises, and boom, the motivation kicks in again. You've just created a perfect oscillating structure that is powered by the very problem you're trying to escape. So here's the critical point, the big takeaway from all this. When your life is mostly about solving problems, you are permanently locked in a state of reaction. You're basically a firefighter. You wake up every morning, you scan the horizon for smoke, and you spend your day rushing around putting out blazes. And yeah, it feels productive, it feels important, but at the end of 10 years, you're still a firefighter. You never took the time to be an architect. You never actually designed and built the city you want to live in. This whole reactive, responsive way of living is built on a hidden and really disempowering idea
that life is just a series of problems that happen to you, and your job is to react to them. It automatically puts you in the position of being a victim of your circumstances. And from that position, it's impossible to ever become the main creative force in your own life. You're not building the house you want. You're just running around frantically patching leaks in a house you don't even like, all while the foundation is slowly cracking underneath you.
Okay, so we've laid out how we get stuck in these oscillating structures. We've seen that our usual tools, sheer willpower and a problem-solving mindset, they actually make the trap stronger. And I get it, that can feel a little bleak. If everything we've been taught to do doesn't actually work, then what on earth are we supposed to do? How do we actually escape the pendulum, escape the tug-of-war? Well, this brings us to the core, game-changing idea of this entire explainer. It's a concept that is as simple as it is powerful. It's a law of nature that we can actually learn to use for our own good, the path of least resistance.
Now, to really wrap our heads around this principle, let's take a little trip to Fritz's hometown, Boston, a city that is famous for its absolutely maddening, illogical streets. I mean, tourists, even people who live there, are constantly wondering who on earth designed this confusing mess. And the answer is so simple: nobody did. The roads in modern Boston weren't designed from some master plan. They grew organically by paving over the winding, meandering cow paths from way back in the 1600s.
Right. Let's try to get inside the head of one of those old colonial cows for a second. The cow is in a field, and it wants to get to some tasty clover on the other side. It doesn't have a map, it's not using a compass, there's no grand strategy. With every single step it takes, that cow makes a tiny, simple decision. What's the easiest way to move forward from right here, right now? It walks around a big rock, not over it. It follows the easy curve of a gentle slope. It doesn't try to charge straight up a steep hill. The cow's path, its moment-to-moment choices, were determined completely and totally by the structure of the land itself.
And this is just such a brilliant illustration of the main principle we have to get. That final winding road wasn't a conscious choice the cow made. It was an outcome, an emergent property of the physical terrain. And here's the really crucial second part. Every time a cow walked that easy path, it packed the dirt down a little more. It wore the grass away, creating a faint trail. And this made the path just a tiny bit easier for the next cow to follow. The structure itself was getting stronger with every single repetition until it became a deep, undeniable rut. This is a perfect metaphor for our own lives. Our behaviors, our habits, our patterns of thinking, they all follow the paths of least resistance that are laid out by the underlying structures of our lives, the terrain of our beliefs, our skills, and our environment.
So here it is, the formal definition, the law of physics we've been building up to. The path of least resistance is a fundamental principle of nature. Energy. Doesn't matter if it's electricity in a wire, water flowing across a landscape, or your own human energy of focus and action. It will always move where it is easiest for it to go. A river doesn't struggle, it doesn't use willpower to get to the ocean. It simply, effortlessly, follows the path that's been carved for it, the riverbed. And this gives us the most powerful insight of all. For your entire life, your actions will always follow the path of least resistance. You can't beat this law. But, and this is the big but, the path itself is determined by the underlying structures. And that means the single most effective thing you can do is not to try and force the river of your life to flow uphill with brute force. The only strategy that creates lasting change is to focus your energy on reshaping the riverbed itself. If you change the structure, the path of least resistance changes automatically. And your energy, your actions, will naturally and effortlessly begin to flow in the new direction you want to go. So this is the big question, isn't it? If our job isn't to push the river, but to change the riverbed, how in the world do we do that? How do we actually go about reshaping the very structure of our lives so that the path of least resistance leads toward our goals, not away from them? Okay, so let's get into the solution. Fritz calls it the creative orientation, and it's all about learning how to create your own gravity, a force so powerful that just naturally starts pulling reality in the direction of your vision.
The engine that drives this new creative structure is not willpower. It's this clean, powerful force he calls structural tension. Now, it is absolutely critical to understand this is not the same as psychological tension, like anxiety or stress. It's not an emotion at all. It's a structural principle, like the tension you feel in a stretched rubber band or on a tuned guitar string. It's a structure that is unstable by its very nature, and it's built for only one purpose:
to resolve. It has a powerful, natural tendency to move toward a state of resolution, and that movement is what pulls you and your actions forward, almost automatically.
So you create this powerful structural tension by clearly defining and holding 2 points or 2 poles in your mind at the very same time. Let's stick with that rubber band idea. Imagine you're stretching a rubber band between your 2 hands. Your first hand, that's pole number 1, a clear, specific, vivid picture of the result you want to create. And this isn't some vague wish like, I want to be happy. No, it's a concrete picture. I want to create a consulting business that has 10 clients a month, brings in $20,000 in revenue, and gives me the freedom to work from anywhere. The more specific you are, the better. Now, your second hand is pole number 2, an honest, objective, no excuses assessment of your current reality. Not what you're afraid of, not what you hope for, just the plain, simple truth. Right now, I have 1 client, I made $1,000 last month, and I don't even have a website. That gap, that discrepancy, the space between those 2 poles, that is what creates the powerful, non-emotional tension in the structure.
And this is where the magic happens. This new structure you just created, this stretched rubber band, is built to resolve itself. It wants to release that tension. So how does a stretched rubber band resolve its tension? It pulls the 2 endpoints closer together. Now, since you are holding that vision pole firm in your mind, that's your commitment, the only way for the structure to resolve is for the other pole, your current reality, to get pulled toward your vision. You have just fundamentally changed the physics of your situation. The path of least resistance has now changed. Actions that used to seem really hard or even impossible now just feel like the next logical step to take to resolve that tension. You'll suddenly find yourself thinking, you know, it makes total sense to build a simple website, or, of course I should call that old colleague. You've stopped fighting the tide. Instead, you've created a new gravitational force that is pulling the future you want into your present reality.
Now, I know this whole framework of creating structural tension might sound a little abstract, a little philosophical, but it's really not. It's a description of the fundamental process behind all creation, whether it's art, science, or business. And to prove it, we can actually see this exact process at work, not in some ancient text, but in one of the most cutting-edge, talked-about fields in the world today. This will really show just how practical and how relevant this principle is right now.
Let's talk about AI prompt engineering. This is the skill of carefully crafting instructions, or prompts, to guide an artificial intelligence, like a ChatGPT or an image generator like Midjourney, to get it to produce a very specific thing you want. Now, anyone who's played with these tools knows that if you just ask a simple question, you often get a pretty generic or even useless answer. A skilled prompt engineer isn't just asking questions, they are consciously and deliberately creating a powerful structural tension for the AI to resolve.
Look at how this process perfectly mirrors the creative orientation we've been talking about. A good prompt engineer starts with pole number 1, a crystal clear vision. Not just a picture of a cat, but something like a photorealistic image of a fluffy ginger cat sleeping in a sunbeam on a stack of old leather-bound books. The style should be warm, with soft lighting and a shallow depth of field. See, that's a clear vision. The AI then spits out an image. That image is pole number 2, current reality. Maybe the cat it made has its eyes open, or the books look brand new. So the engineer makes an honest assessment. Nope, this isn't what I envisioned yet. Now what do? They don't just throw their hands up in frustration. They refine the prompt. They add more detail, more constraints. The cat's eyes must be closed. The books need to look antique and well-worn. In Fritz's language, they are increasing the structural tension. They're making the vision pole more precise and the reality pole more defined. And what happens? The AI, following this new path of least resistance that's been created by this super-specific tension, generates an image that gets closer and closer to the user's vision. It is a perfect real-time example of how creating a tension between a clear vision and a clear view of reality naturally resolves by pulling reality toward that vision.
So we've gone on quite a journey here, right? From that frustrating hamster wheel to a really powerful framework for creation. We've shifted our whole focus from willpower to structure, from just solving problems to actually creating. And this model, it's incredibly empowering on a personal level. It basically hands us the architect's blueprints, and it lets us become the main creative force in our own lives. But acknowledging how powerful this framework is also means we have to ask a final and absolutely critical question. Fritz's theory is a masterclass in changing our internal structures, our beliefs, our vision, our focus. But does focusing on our own internal riverbed risk underestimating the massive, crushing power of large-scale external structures? Think about it. For a person who's facing the structural realities of systemic poverty, or deep-seated discrimination, or political oppression, the path of least resistance in their life is often carved by forces far, far beyond their individual control. Can changing your own internal creative structure really be enough to overcome the massive societal riverbeds that have been carved by history and economics and power? Now, that's not a simple question with an easy answer. It's a really crucial and challenging thought to end on. It's a reminder that while we are, for sure, powerful creators in our own lives, we also exist inside of and are shaped by larger structures that also need our creative energy, our attention, and maybe our collective will to change them too.